Okay, yeah, righto. Time to do some video. I've been hanging on to these notes for a long time, and I'm actually a little bit worried that this particular video topic might be seen as inappropriate, which is probably why I hadn't done the video. Anyway, I'm just doing my sound check to make sure everything is working. So it's working good. Okay, so I will put the start time for this video down in the description for those of you who want to skip past all of my sound check and just setting up and letting people jump into the room and all that sort of thing. I will open it up for questions, feedback, just interaction with me near the end of the live stream like I always do. How long will this live stream take? I would like to think that about 10 minutes would be the limit, but as always, I'm not always that good at estimating or guessing how long it will take me to talk about something. I have about 2 pages. So it's drink of water time, and it's down to the nitty gritty. Let's talk about metagaming. What a can of worms. All right, here we go. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about Dungeons and Dragons 5e, it could be any version of Dungeons and Dragons. And I've been hanging out for quite some time. I was really reluctant to do a video on this topic because it is so contentious, and usually it's the type of video that could wind up with a lot of my subscribers leaving, or a lot of very upset people in the comments section. So this is why I haven't really talked about metagaming. So let's talk about metagaming the hairy balls out of Dungeons and Dragons, or the heck, or the HELL out of Dungeons and Dragons, because it happens all the time, so we might as well talk about the elephant in the room that always exists when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. So the first question is, look, what the heck is metagaming? Metagaming, for those of you who don't know, is when a player takes their own personal knowledge and information, what they know, and they incorporate it in their playing of the game, when in fact their character would not know the information that they know as a player, and they wouldn't be able to actually use that information. So it's kind of, metagaming is viewed as cheating. Now, when I say a player, I don't honestly mean just a person who plays a character, because I do believe that dungeon masters can metagame too. I know a lot of people are going to say, Fred, dungeon masters can't metagame. It's not possible. And if they were, they're allowed to. And that's all fine. But I want to sort of point out a few things about metagaming before you start jumping to any conclusions. Maybe I will change your mind, maybe I won't. So let's talk about how you can metagame. There are lots of different ways, right? So let's talk about all the different ones that I know of, that I've seen at my table used many times. The first one is, why don't you crack open a good old book and read some of the published Wizards of the Coast's adventures? Because as a player, you know, if you read the adventure, then you've got a good idea of what's going to happen next. And by doing that, then of course the Dungeon Master can't spring some sort of horrible surprise on you and your character wind up dying, and therefore you have to make another character. And often this is why a player will go and read the adventures, because they don't want to have their character die. They're so invested in it. And also they view it as a game where there is a winner or a loser. And therefore, one of the easiest ways to actually make sure you win the game, if that's how you view the game, is to go and look at all the walkthroughs and the playthroughs and check out, do a bit of intelligence, do a bit of research. So reading the adventures before the Dungeon Master can run the game certainly is classified as metagaming. Oh, this is my favourite one. This is quite a common one as it happens. Why don't you just settle down, find a nice cozy spot, and read and memorize the entire monster manual. Now that's not always, that's pretty obviously metagaming, and it certainly seems like you are cheating, but I've heard the saying from many people, well, look, I use the monster manual I'm not a dungeon master, but I'm using the monster manual because my kids really enjoy the lore in the book, and I read out those sections. I'm not actually looking at the stat block and all of the mechanics behind the game for that monster. No, it's just because I like reading the fluff. That might be the case, but you are also reading the stat block. So I think that definitely classifies as metagaming. And it's very hard not to metagame if you are a dungeon master and you're being a player, because the chances are you will remember a lot of the stat blocks in the monster manual. It's just how it is. And you play as a player long enough, you'll probably remember many of the attributes of a monster that you've come across before. Now, your character may never have come across that monster, but you have as a player. But we're going to say that's definitely metagaming. Certainly another type of metagaming. Oh, this is the one that sort of can be very easy to do, and that is, let's just peek over the Dungeon Master's screen and have a good look there. Oh, I can see what he's rolling, I can see his notes, but more importantly, I can see what the map sort of indicates. Which way should we go? We're going to go left? Are we going to go right? Or, of course, you've got a Dungeon Master who has just a Dungeon Master screen and actually nothing behind it, and that's a bit of a shock, I'm sure. But peeking over the Dungeon Master's screen is probably classified as metagaming. I think we can definitely call that a metagame. Oh, I love this one. This is the one that really can sort of throw things for a twist, and that is, why don't... Oh, I rolled really bad. I rolled a 1. I rolled a 2. I rolled really low. It's time to insist that everybody in your entire party get to roll a 20-sided dice if a check is clearly far too low and you've probably failed it. What we want to do is succeed, because bad things happen when we fail. And this is like, I've got to roll. Why can't Bruce and George and Jill also roll? It seems reasonable to me. And then, of course, you get into discussion, and of course, all the players want to roll a dice. And if you've got 4 or 5 players all rolling a 20-sided dice, the chances are somebody's going to roll a high number rather than a low number. So I think that definitely is classified as metagaming when you know what the numerical value is that you've rolled is going to be low, and you don't really want a low number, because usually low is bad in Dungeons and Dragons. Oh, this is definitely a bad one, and that is reading the Dungeon Master's notes when they leave the table. Now, of course, you can try and read the notes while they're at the table. Might be a bit difficult, but certainly once they've got to go to the toilet, or they've got to get some food or drink, or they've just got to go and they've forgotten something, they've left the oven on or something like that, they've got to go and do something, get something out of their car, and this is a good opportunity to sort of meander, have a good look through the rules that he's put out and laid out for you, and there's all of his notes. So now we know exactly what's going to happen, unless of course he realizes that we are going to read his notes and he's left some notes that have nothing to do with the adventure that we're going to be playing. Let's hope that's not the case. So reading the Dungeon Master's notes is definitely metagaming in some way. Here's one that might throw a few people for a little curly one, and that is, what about if we provide positive feedback on playtesting rules that build metagaming specifically into the core rules? You know, there wasn't metagaming there before, or there wasn't very much, and now if we give positive feedback on rules and class features that involve metagaming, then that means the designers are probably going to put that into the rule system. We've now built metagaming into the system, and therefore we don't have to argue with the Dungeon Master about things we would like to metagame, because it's already there. I think a good example for me would be D&D Next, which is now Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Now, not to say that I don't like Dungeons & Dragons 5e, or I had any issues with D&D Next, but let's get real, I'm sure some of that was taking place at some point somewhere along there. Okay, next on the metagaming, and that would be, let's take a bit of time. There are a few rules that we don't particularly like, so let's pressure the game designers at Wizards of the Coast and get them via the internet, social media and various other methods to embrace metagaming, because really then if we've got them on board, then we don't need to worry about metagaming and our Dungeon Master's got nothing to really argue with us about or any other player, because it's already baked in. Sort of a little bit like the last comment that I made, but you get the idea. Let's just apply a bit of pressure. It doesn't take that long, invest a couple of years or a few months, and eventually you might actually get somewhere. It might actually work. This is the one that can be a bit scary, and that is, why don't you just shadow your Dungeon Master? Just follow them on the community, Facebook, all the different forums and pages where they ask questions. So if you can see what your Dungeon Master, you figure out what their login is, their username, and you just follow the questions that they ask. And once you have a look at those questions, you get a good idea of where their head's at. So now you understand what you're dealing with. Certainly very, very interesting strategy from a player, and certainly a little bit scary, I have to say, but certainly I would say that sounds like metagaming to me. Now, for those of you who are wondering, Fred, are you going to say that just players metagame? I thought you said that Dungeon Masters can metagame too. Well, actually, yes, they can metagame. Well, certainly I believe they can. And if you disagree with me, that's perfectly fine. But I'm going to put this out here because this is not really about whether it's right or wrong. This is just about the ways that you can metagame in your game, so you know how to do it properly, right? You want to have as many tools available to you as possible. So how about let's create some table house rules to shift the power balance from the player's characters, because the player's characters got way too much power, back towards the monsters. Let's make a nice thick book, a manual that will ensure that we shift the power balance in some way. That way we don't need to worry about having to sort of rejiggy everything if we build in these house rules. And of course it's only a little bit of light reading for the players to do. Yes, why not we do that? I think that's definitely going to be classified as metagaming by the Dungeon Master in some way. Oh, this is the one I love. This is a good one. Why don't you spend your time as the Dungeon Master checking through, reading and noting down the player's characters' abilities. All of your players' characters' abilities and features that they have. If you take a few notes, then you can figure out, that really impressive strategy and tactic that they've been using multiple times. Do a little bit of research, then you can figure out how to counter that. That's another story, but I mean, you have to, Fred, you have to read the character sheet to make sure they haven't filled it out incorrectly. Well, of course, that seems reasonable to me. But when you start reading and checking things and making sure that you've got a good idea of how all of the different characters can put their abilities together, I think that's definitely falling in the realm of metagaming. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but I think it definitely falls in the realm of metagaming. This is another one where it sort of follows on from this idea, and that is planning counter strategies to known player tactics, so you know that your players use a particular tactic in the game. Now that we know this, all we need to do is take a bit of time and come up with some strategies. We've jumped on the internet, have a talk to some friends and other Dungeon Masters, and come up with some clever strategies. There's bound to be somebody on the internet making, articles on monster tactics, or maybe monster tactics on YouTube. There's bound to be somebody doing that, and we can go and check out that stuff, and then that'll help us counter some of the strategies that our players are using. Or if we watch some of the other channels and some of the other articles that are on the internet and talk to a few people, we can come up with some better strategies for dealing with some of the players' tactics. I think that certainly seems to feel like it's falling into the metagame bucket as well. Certainly, we've got lots of different ways to metagame so far. It's been working out quite well, I have to say. All right, the next one of my favorites. I use it constantly. In fact, I'm almost married to this one. Modifying and building monsters because the players remember the monster manual stat blocks. So let's see. Now they know this monster. It's a Cyclops, but if I put a horn on it and change it a little bit, it'll give it a few more resistances and immunities, maybe pump out a bit more damage, a few more hit points. Well, it doesn't quite look like the same monster it was before. In fact, that turtle, that turtle's a totally different turtle to the one in the monster manual, because I want my monster manual turtle to be awesome and impressive and challenging and scary. I don't really want it to be crushed like a bug because my players know exactly how it works. I think that definitely falls under metagaming. Yes, I think that does too. Here's a good one, and that is, let's think about the Matrix. Changing things in the Matrix. What about changing the published adventures? When the players buy the books and read them, you know they've bought the book. You know they read the book. So now what have you got to do? Well, you feel like you have to change stuff because now they know what's coming. And so they've metagamed. Well, they metagamed, so I'm going to have to metagame to change that back, to change the power balance, and to get a bit more sort of excitement in the game. Because now if I change it, they don't know what's going to happen. And that's the whole point, right? Is not to know what's going to happen. It sort of feels like changing the published adventures because we know the players are metagaming, so we have to metagame. It feels like metagaming as well because we're changing stuff. We know that they're doing that, so we're doing a lot of stuff that sort of seems a little bit odd. It's almost as if it's a recurring pattern. It forms some sort of circle or cycle of some kind. Oh, here's a really good one, and that is they have figured out this really cool strategy. And this combination is so impressive that we have no choice but to nerf the game mechanics that are extremely beneficial. Any rules that are extremely beneficial for the player's character, we need to change them around. We have to nerf them down, make them less powerful, because if we don't, it's going to be way too easy, and how can we possibly challenge them if we do something like that, if we allow that to take place? So we've got to nerf it down. Sort of feels like that might be metagaming again. This is this ugly cycle, although maybe it's just a natural process of playing the game. Oh, this is a good one. Using your phone to check monster stat blocks if you are not the dungeon master. This is more players. I mean, as a dungeon master, using your phone to check the monster stat blocks seems perfectly fine because you need to know what they are. As a player, well, we don't want to be carrying around a big heavy book because that's pretty obvious, but if I have my phone, it just looks like I'm texting, but I'm actually looking up the monster stat block for the big monster and standing in front of me. There's a Hydra coming. I need to really have a good idea of how many hit points it has, what its armor class is, what sort of resistance is, how fast it moves, and generally what it will do. So yes, I think that's definitely going to be classified as metagaming in some form or another. Oh, this is one I love. I've used this as a player many times for those of you who are unaware, and that's text messaging to gather information either on the adventure, so you can jump online and have a look at what sort of the adventure is, some walkthroughs, some information on it, or so you can communicate with another player. Sometimes they won't even know. If you do it underneath the table, they won't even see that phone. Or you might even decide to use the text messaging to communicate with your dungeon master and get additional information if they are willing to give it up. A few extra pizzas that they particularly like might work quite well. Or this is the scary one. That's stalking them on social media using text messaging and an email. It sort of feels a little bit like metagaming to me as well. So I think I've tried to indicate and make the point that there's this cycle, and the cycle is the player's metagame, and then the dungeon master counters by metagaming, which means that the players then metagame again to counter the metagaming from the dungeon master. In some cases, some dungeon masters skip the step where the players metagame and go straight to the metagame before the players have had chance to actually metagame, and therefore the players feel they have to metagame. They're followed up by a counter metagame by the dungeon master, and the cycle goes on endlessly until one of us all perishes, or we get frustrated with the whole situation and decide that everybody's cheating and we're going to go and play at a different table. So I don't know that this video was supposed to be educational or informative, but if you understood the message that I was trying to communicate today, hit the thumbs up button. If you are completely confused and you have no idea what I am on about and whether you actually want to continue watching my channel, then maybe the thumbs down button is the right button for you. Now, if you want to keep watching content like this, hit the subscribe button. If you're not subscribed, hit the bell button to also be notified when I'm live and when I publish new videos, because as it happens, I do actually publish quite a few different videos, and you're welcome to check them out if you want to. Now, if you want to support my channel so I keep making videos like this, then you did so by watching this video, and thank you very much. I do appreciate it. If you want to continue to support me, watch more of my videos. I have hundreds of videos for players and dungeon masters that you can check out wherever you like. There's a huge range, nice wide range of videos. I don't do Patreon, but I do have affiliate links down in the description for the book depository and Amazon, where you can buy stuff online. And essentially, I get a small commission and you pay exactly the same price. And that basically helps me buy stuff and keep the channel running. And if you want to support me so I keep doing that, then that's the way to go. Or just keep watching my videos. Either one is fine with me. Now, this is your opportunity to ask questions, give feedback, or more importantly, the question I have for you is, what sort of metagaming do you do in the game of Dungeons and Dragons? What sort of metagaming do you do or do you know of that I have not talked about that you think needs to be communicated to people so they know how to do it properly? So that they have a few more tools out there so that the cycle can continue. Please, by all means, share with me your views and your knowledge, because we can all learn from each other. Because, you know, as I said, we have a party here of 4 characters, and plonking down a Hydra might seem like a good idea, but, you know, if somebody else decides to show up to the table, you know, somebody was a bit late, and suddenly we've got a paladin in the mix, and we know that the paladin can smite, and then the combination with all the other characters just means that things are going to get more difficult. Well, we can always throw in a couple more monsters, can't we, as the dungeon master? Nobody's ever going to know that we didn't actually have them planned in the first place, but we'll just chuck in a couple of Grellions just to make it a little bit more interesting. And of course, you know, if if our dungeon master is unaware, we might actually have some sort of spell. We might have a friend. We'll invite Dritz over for the day, and he's going to help us fight these monsters, up the ante just a little bit, just make it a little bit more interesting. And of course, our dungeon master is going to counter. Let's bring in some, I think like an enormous werewolf creature. That'll do it. And we can also bring in like a shambling mound, and how about like a nice big vine-like creature that could eat them. And really, if that's not enough, we just get ourselves a god. Just bring a god along, and we'll just stick the god down. Play the god card. That's always a good one. Let's play the god card. Nice god, nice god. Okay, and hey, that's all I have. Until next time, keep rolling those 20s. I'm not gone. I'm still here. I'm hoping that people understood what I was trying to communicate today. Because sometimes my wit is so dry, it's brittle, and it just confuses people rather than actually help. But I've really struggled with the idea of doing a video on metagaming. There's lots of videos on it. And it's a topic which, to be honest, I don't really care very much about. There's only one aspect to metagaming that I really care about, and if anybody wants to know about it, they're welcome to ask me. Otherwise, I probably won't say very much more than that. Okay, let's go to the... Oh my gosh! Hello, Dan. Thank you very much for the super chat. That's really appreciated. Thank you a lot. Dear Jesus, funny, I didn't think players reading the module or looking up stats was metagaming. I would think of that as cheating instead. Yes, well, certainly it does seem like cheating, but it's also metagaming because it's taking the knowledge they have as a player into the game and using it with their character so that they know what all the sort of attributes to the monster is. I mean, it's still the same sort of thing taking place when you've played the game so much that you can't help but metagame, because you know that a zombie has an armor class of 8, and that's information that's not going to go, and therefore it becomes more difficult for you to not metagame if you've fought zombies before, but that particular character has only ever faced a zombie once. Dear Jesus, Dan, do you have a question or some feedback for me? I do really appreciate your money. I really do. Thank you very much. Dear Jesus, takes away the adventure aspect of playing D&D if you know what's going to happen before it happens. Well, yes, it certainly does. I've ditched the idea of fudging dice, because I realised that if I fudge the dice, the only reason I fudged dice, and I've done videos on this before, is because I was scared of what would happen if I rolled really well or really badly. And so once you get past that, then you don't really care. And it's funny how, as a dungeon master, as you mature, the thing that you notice the most is the important factor is not really giving a toss. It's one of the best things, not giving a toss about the outcome of your game and what players are doing at the table. I don't ever check my players' character sheets. I don't even check to see if they are cheating or had got things wrong. I just don't worry about it at all. Because I figure if they're going to do it and I check their sheets and then I give it back to them, they may do it again. So what is the point? I don't want to take that circular route if I can help it. Dear Jesus, I always thought of metagaming as min-maxing our stats and finding loopholes. Now, metagaming is certainly might seem like it's loopholes might cover that. Certainly loopholes, there are loopholes. You can bring in metagaming through loopholes, but often min-maxing and loopholes are just a product of power gaming and they're not playing Dungeons and Dragons. What they're trying to do is they're trying to outthink the rules. A lot of people, when they're playing that way, what they're really looking for is a challenge about how to pull apart a rule system and find the holes in how it works. Or their abilities could be abused. Sort of reminds me of wargaming mentality. Well, what are you going to do? Often people are playing with dice. Wargaming has dice. You're playing on a grid or a map that has squares. Now, often wargamers have a map, or not so much a grid, but sometimes there is. But wargamers, they'll have a map or terrain that they're working from, very, very similar, and they're using miniatures. And so Dungeons and Dragons, if you're playing with miniatures, it starts looking like a wargame, doesn't it? Therefore, that mentality sort of makes a lot of sense. And you've got to remember, a lot of people who played war games wind up playing Dungeons and Dragons. I'm one of them. I started with wargaming, and I moved from that into Dungeons and Dragons and roleplay games. Dear Jesus, I feel alone in the chat. Yes, you are. You seem very much alone. Yes, thank you for saying something. Everyone forgot to write the first word. You've written a lot. Hello, Dan. Hey, thank you for the super chat, by the way. I dare not fudge dice since I brought a game science dice. Laugh out loud. I feel like I would be cheating myself. Dear. Dear. See, I mean, you think about it. You know, are you? Is it metagaming or cheating? There is a fine line between cheating and metagaming, but really, what I put forward was a lot of different ideas. Whether you agree with me is a different story. Fika. Hello, Fika. So before I disappear, because I need to, and I have bought myself a whole bunch of videos, I thought I would at least tell you guys what I'm doing tomorrow. For those of you, you might be aware that I made a whiteboard, magnetic whiteboard, very small, for sticking on a fridge and for using for tracking your initiative and writing down notes and so forth, so you could rub it off with a dry erase. and use it for a fridge magnet so you can do your shopping list. I'm going to be doing the live stream for that particular video tomorrow, because I found that my first attempt worked out fine. It just took a little while to come right. So I will do that tomorrow, so you'll get to see that. Hi Dan, what do you got here? I found your channel looking for tips on the Lost Mine of Phandelver. I'm not surprised. It seems to be the big draw for a lot of people. Have my videos helped you, Dan? If they are helping you with the Lost Mine of Phandelver, that's awesome news. I only have 2 players and they control 2 characters each. Okay, I see. So letting them metagame a bit have made them roleplay more and more over time. Yep. That certainly can be the case. Now, Dan, you'll notice that I didn't necessarily say that the things that I discussed were bad. Some of them certainly do seem like there are bad things to do, but metagaming is just something that seems to have wound up becoming part of the game. It's always had some sort of aspect of metagaming involved for it to all work. You need your players to metagame and buy in to the Dungeon Master anyway. That's all part of it. The only types of metagaming that I find really I dislike, and that is when people obviously or clearly are using the Wizards of the Coast or Dungeons & Dragons design team's surveys as a way of shaping the game to build in more clearly metagamey ideas and concepts into the game which didn't necessarily need to be there. Yet they've decided that that would be the best way, and their feedback is what is driving that particular mechanism. Now, the design team have opened themselves up to that, so they're part and responsible for that, but for every person who allows that to take place when they're giving feedback, those are the sorts of things that I dislike. And the last one is probably the one I dislike the most, and that is utilizing social media, whether that be Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or whatever, anything, to apply pressure to design teams, to Jeremy Crawford, Mike Merles, Chris Perkins, and anybody else involved in the rules and that's design, to change things because they don't like the way the rules have been laid out. Now, rules always change, but I still feel like that is a very selfish and underhanded way of approaching things. That's just my view. You do not need to agree with me, but those are the 2 things that I get upset with the most. I totally understand that players will read the adventure, and I totally understand that Dungeon Masters will change published adventures, and I totally understand that players will read the monster manual or remember the stats from a monster, and therefore Dungeon Masters will change the stat blocks because players know what to expect and they want to give them a bit of a surprise and keep things interesting. So a lot of that makes perfect sense to me. Okay, I'm not saying those things are bad, I am just saying it is a cycle between player and Dungeon Master that's really never ending. That's really what I wanted to communicate today. So Dan, one of the things you can do with your 2 players is you could give them, instead of 2 characters to play, you could give them 1 character and 1 really impressive hench person, henchwoman, henchman, hench monster, or somebody who doesn't have a lot of personality to play, or particularly if they're finding it difficult, if you're finding it's working for you, go for it. Or animal companions. This is a good time to use the animal companion, because you can have them level up and be at about the same power level as a player's character, so that 2 players essentially are playing 2 characters. 1 character is a fleshed out and complicated character, and the other one is just a fairly simple one where it's just you're playing an animal. I know that a lot of people like the idea of having some sort of animal companion in the game, so it's a good strategy. But what you're doing, there's nothing wrong with it. You've got 2 players, and 2 players is always dangerous, right? So having four characters on the table is a much better option. Scott, it's always good to realise that the origins for D&D were wargaming. Salute, Fred. Yes, and funny. Isn't it funny that a lot of us have come from wargaming and given up wargaming and gone to Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing. The reason I did it is because none of the people I was playing 40k with, or Fantasy Warhammer, they weren't really my friends. What I wanted was a long-lasting relationship and friendship with people, and really role-play games and Dungeons and Dragons does that far better than any other game I've ever played. I've never formed strong relationships by playing Monopoly or Snakes and Ladders or even chess. In fact, I probably lost relationships by playing those games rather than made them. Dear Jesus, nice Scott, I learned something new today. Oh, good. What's that, Dan? Yes, they have helped a lot, and I find your content lovely. Okay, good. So those videos are working out awesome, and they reflect our deep knowledge. What? They reflect your deep knowledge of the game. Well, Dan, there's a secret. The secret is I'm just an average guy on YouTube. There's nothing particularly special about me. I just happen to be saying what most people who Dungeon Master would say. And because I'm not too concerned about losing subscribers and how much money the channel makes, because it's not my job, I have a job, I can get away with making videos about anything I like, really. I will be back tomorrow when your streaming starts. Okay, yes, so we're going to do a flexible magnetic whiteboard tomorrow. It is the Easter weekend for me, so that means that I have the next 4 days off, which means I'm going to do a lot of content over those 4 days. So expect lots of interesting things from me. Probably a few tongue-in-cheek ideas, and probably a few things that are more in line with just providing you with decent advice. What's that, dear Jesus? Fred, did you have a video on traveling? I have a video on describing travel. Is that what you were after, dear Jesus? If you want a video on just how to deal with travel in Dungeons and Dragons, I could sum up travel really fast for you right now if you want. And if that video doesn't work for you, my advice to you is make travel quick. If it takes a long time, don't spend a lot of time on it. It's one of the areas of the game players don't really care about. And it's only, I think, Dungeon Masters who care about that sort of stuff, honestly. What's that, Scott? Was Chainmail also a war game, or was that considered D&D? I believe that Chainmail was a form of wargaming that was converted over to be Dungeons and Dragons, but certainly Dungeons and Dragons came from or was born from Chainmail, the rule system that was put together. Yeah. Random encounters and food water usage. Okay, dear Jesus, I'll tell you what. I've got 4 days. I'll watch lots and lots of YouTube videos, and I have actually pre-recorded a whole lot of notes that I took in the car on random encounters, things you can drop into your game. And I promised I would do videos on them. There's like 40 of the silly things. I just need to get around to turning them into written notes, so I'll start doing that, okay? I had planned to do that, I just haven't got round to it. There's never enough time, too much to talk about, never enough time. So, yes, I will make sure I have at least one of those available for you. I have a bucket load of them. It's just getting time to sort of pull them all apart and write them all down. Okay, I think... Oh, what's that, Dan? Yes, I change things in the adventure. Give stories to NPCs and monsters. Yeah, it's part of the fun of Dungeons and Dragons, is being able to make things your own. And I think that's, honestly, to be fair, the monster manual is just like a starting block for a lot of things. And even the adventures are just like a starting block, aren't they? You want to build from there and do something else with it. RexyBot, how's it going? Love your channel, brother. Thanks for all of the guidance. You're welcome. It's been a while. You haven't jumped into the live chat for ages, but, it's timing, eh? We're all in different parts of the world. Okay, I think it's time for me to go. I'm about to lose my voice, and I would like to go and have a little chill out since it's been a long day. And I will catch up with everybody tomorrow. So have a good day, a good night, a good morning, good afternoon. Look after your family, look after yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.